The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the Columbia Bank and Trust, throwing Olivia Garrison against the dusty window hard enough to bruise her shoulder. And she knew in that instant that her carefully constructed new life was about to shatter, just like the one she had left behind in San Francisco 3 months ago. It was July of 1872, and the California heat pressed down on Columbia like a suffocating blanket. Olivia stepped out of the coach, her dark green traveling dress already clinging to her skin with perspiration. She had chosen this small mining town precisely because it was unremarkable, because nobody here would know about the scandal that had driven her from the city, because she could disappear into obscurity and perhaps find some measure of peace. Her leather valise felt heavy in her hand, weighted not just with her few belongings but with the shame she carried everywhere. The main street was a chaos of activity despite the oppressive heat. Miners stumbled from saloons, their faces ruddy with drink and sun. Wagons rolled past, kicking up clouds of golden dust that caught in the afternoon light. Women in practical calico dresses hurried along the wooden sidewalks, parasols held high against the relentless sun. Columbia had seen better days since the initial gold rush fever had passed, but it still held onto its rough vitality with both hands. Olivia made her way toward the boarding house that Mrs. Chen had recommended in her letter. The Chinese woman ran a respectable establishment, she had written, and asked no unnecessary questions. That last part had been the deciding factor. Olivia was 24 years old and already felt ancient with regret. She had not noticed the man watching her from across the street until he stepped directly into her path. "Afternoon, miss," he said, tipping his hat. He was perhaps 28, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water in spring. His brown hair needed cutting, curling slightly over his collar, and his clothing marked him as a working cowboy, dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a bandana tied loosely around his throat. "You look a bit lost." "I am not lost," Olivia said, more sharply than she intended. "I am perfectly capable of finding my way." Something flickered in his expression, amusement perhaps, but he simply touched his hat again. "Did not mean to offend. Name is Quinn Prescott. I work the Riverside Ranch about 5 miles east of town. Just thought you might be new to Columbia, and sometimes folks appreciate a friendly word." Olivia felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment at her own rudeness. This was exactly the kind of behavior that had gotten her into trouble before, her inability to trust, her defensive walls built so high that kindness bounced off them like stones. "I apologize. The journey has left me rather tired. I am Olivia Garrison. I will be staying at Mrs. Chen's boarding house." "Good choice," Quinn said, and his smile was genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Mrs. Chen is as fine a woman as you will find in California. Her cooking is not bad either, though do not tell her I said it that way. She would chase me down the street with her wooden spoon." He paused, then added, "If you need anything while you are settling in, the Riverside Ranch is easy to find. Just follow the creek east." Before Olivia could respond, he had tipped his hat once more and walked away, his gait easy and unhurried despite the heat. She watched him go, confused by the encounter. Men in San Francisco had wanted things from her always. Their kindness had come with strings attached, with expectations that had slowly strangled her until she could hardly breathe. But this cowboy had asked for nothing, offered help without pressure, and left before she could even properly respond. Mrs. Chen's boarding house was a 2-story structure painted white with green shutters, remarkably well-maintained compared to many of the buildings in Columbia. A small garden flourished improbably in the front, vegetables and herbs somehow thriving despite the summer heat. Mrs. Chen herself answered the door, a diminutive woman with silver threading through her black hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. "Miss Garrison," she said, and her voice was warm. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted from your journey." The room Mrs. Chen showed her was simple but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a handmade quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a small desk beneath the window that looked out onto the main street. It was more than adequate. It was, in fact, more than Olivia felt she deserved. "Thank you," she managed. "It is perfect." Mrs. Chen studied her with those penetrating eyes. "Dinner is at 6. There are 3 other boarders, all respectable. 2 miners who are brothers from Pennsylvania and a school teacher named Miss Hartley. We do not pry into each other's business here, Miss Garrison. Everyone has their reasons for being where they are." After Mrs. Chen left, Olivia sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment of weakness. She pressed her hands to her face, feeling the sting of tears she refused to shed. San Francisco felt both impossibly distant and suffocatingly close. She could still see Charles Whitmore's face when she had refused his proposal, the way his expression had shifted from affection to something cold and calculating. She could still hear the rumors he had spread afterward, lies mixed with enough truth to be devastating. That she was a fortune hunter. That she had led him on. That her family's money, what little remained of it after her father's poor investments, had been her only real attraction. The worst part was that some of it was true. She had considered Charles's proposal carefully, had weighed his wealth and position against her own dwindling prospects. She had nearly said yes for all the wrong reasons. And when she had finally listened to her conscience and refused him, when she had chosen honesty over security, he had destroyed her reputation so thoroughly that her own mother had stopped speaking to her. That was her mistake. Not refusing Charles, but ever entertaining his courtship in the first place. Allowing herself to be guided by fear and practicality instead of integrity. She had promised herself that she would never again compromise her values for comfort. Never again let herself be swayed by what was easy instead of what was right. Columbia was her chance to start over, to find work and build a life on her own terms. She had some skill with numbers, had kept her father's books before he died. Perhaps someone in town needed a bookkeeper or a clerk. It was not much, but it was honest work, and honesty was the only currency she valued anymore. Dinner that evening was a surprisingly pleasant affair. The 2 miners, Robert and James Callahan, were weathered men in their 40s who spoke little but were unfailingly polite. Miss Hartley, whose first name was Dorothy, was perhaps 35, with a sharp wit and a generous laugh. They welcomed Olivia without overwhelming her with questions, and Mrs. Chen's cooking was indeed excellent. A beef stew rich with vegetables from her garden and fresh bread still warm from the oven. "What brings you to Columbia, Miss Garrison?" Dorothy asked as they cleared the dishes. "If you do not mind my asking." "I am looking for work," Olivia said carefully. "I have experience keeping books and managing accounts. I thought perhaps a mining operation or a business in town might have need of such skills." Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. "You should speak with Mr. Henderson at the Mercantile. His previous clerk left last month to try his luck in the goldfields again. He has been struggling to keep up with the accounts himself." "Thank you," Olivia said. "I will call on him tomorrow." That night, lying in her narrow bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Columbia settling into darkness, Olivia felt something she had not experienced in months. Not quite hope, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of hope. Maybe here, in this dusty mining town so far from everything she had known, She could finally become the person she wanted to be instead of the person circumstances had tried to make her. She did not know then that Quinn Prescott was lying awake 5 miles away at the Riverside Ranch, thinking about the guarded woman with the sad eyes he had met on the street, wondering what sorrows she carried, and why he felt such a pull toward someone he had spoken to for less than 5 minutes. The next morning dawned hot and bright, the sun already fierce by the time Olivia made her way to Henderson's Mercantile. The store was packed with goods of every description, from mining equipment to bolts of fabric, from tinned foods to medicines. Mr. Henderson himself was a harried-looking man of perhaps 50, with thinning hair and spectacles perpetually sliding down his nose. "Miss Garrison," he said when she introduced herself. "Dorothy Hartley sent word you might be calling. Frankly, I am desperate. My accounts are in complete disarray. If you can make sense of them, the position is yours." He led her to a small office in the back of the store, where ledgers were piled haphazardly on a desk covered in receipts, invoices, and what appeared to be several months' worth of unrecorded transactions. Olivia felt a familiar flutter of excitement. This was something she understood, something she was good at. Numbers did not lie. They did not spread rumors or question her character. They simply were, and either balanced or did not. "May I have today to review the situation?" she asked. "I can provide you with an assessment by this evening." Mr. Henderson looked as though she had offered him salvation. "Please, take whatever time you need. The office is yours." Olivia removed her gloves, rolled up her sleeves, and began to work. She sorted receipts by date, cross-referenced invoices with inventory, and slowly began to untangle the mess. It was painstaking work, but she found it soothing. Here, in this cluttered office, she had a clear purpose. The numbers told her exactly what they needed, and she could provide it. She was so absorbed in her work that she did not notice when someone entered the store's main room. She did not hear the conversation or the transaction. It was only when a shadow fell across her desk that she looked up, startled, to find Quinn Prescott standing in the doorway of the office, a wrapped package under one arm. "Miss Garrison," he said, and he looked genuinely pleased to see her. "Did not expect to find you here." "Mr. Prescott," she replied, trying to smooth her hair back into place. She was suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look, ink on her fingers and her sleeves rolled up like a common laborer. "I am assisting Mr. Henderson with his accounts." "That is good news for Henderson," Quinn said. "Man has been drowning in paperwork for months." He hesitated, then added, "I am glad you are settling in. Columbia can be a rough town, but it has its virtues if you know where to look." "And do you know where to look?" Olivia asked, surprising herself with the question. There was something about this man that bypassed her usual defenses, made her curious instead of cautious. Quinn's smile was slow and warm. "I am learning. Been here about 2 years now. Came west from Missouri after the war. Figured California was far enough from old memories." There was a story there, Olivia knew, layers of experience in those simple words. Before she could decide whether to ask, Mr. Henderson called from the front of the store and Quinn tipped his hat to her. "Should let you get back to work," he said. "Maybe I will see you around town, Miss Garrison." After he left, Olivia found it harder to concentrate. Her mind kept drifting back to the cowboy with the kind eyes and the easy manner. She told herself it meant nothing, that she had no business even thinking about such things. She had come to Columbia to rebuild her life, not to complicate it further with romantic entanglements. Her last attempt at courtship had ended in disaster, and she had promised herself that she would focus on independence, on creating a life that belonged to her alone. But when she finally left the Mercantile that evening, having successfully organized 2 months of neglected accounts, and secured the position as Mr. Henderson's clerk at a fair wage. She caught herself scanning the street for a familiar figure in a blue shirt and worn chaps. She did not see him, and told herself the disappointment she felt was merely fatigue from a long day's work. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Olivia worked at the Mercantile 6 days a week, untangling Mr. Henderson's accounts and implementing a system that would prevent such chaos in the future. She took her meals at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, where she gradually became part of the small household's easy camaraderie. Dorothy proved to be an excellent friend, intelligent and funny, with a pragmatic view of life that Olivia found refreshing. She saw Quinn Prescott occasionally, always at a distance. He would ride into town for supplies, sometimes alone, sometimes with other ranch hands from the riverside. He always tipped his hat to her if their eyes met, always offered a friendly greeting if they passed on the street, but he never pressed for more. Olivia found herself both grateful for his restraint and oddly frustrated by it. 3 weeks after her arrival in Columbia, everything changed. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Olivia had finished her work at the Mercantile early. She decided to walk to the creek that ran east of town, seeking some relief from the oppressive heat. The water was low from the summer drought but still flowing, creating pools and eddies that caught the light like scattered coins. She found a large rock shaded by willows and sat down, removing her boots and stockings to dip her feet in the cool water. For the first time in months, she felt something close to contentment. The sound of the water was soothing, the shade a blessing, and the solitude a rare gift. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to simply exist without worry or regret, just for a moment. Beautiful spot, is it not? Olivia's eyes flew open. Quinn Prescott stood a few yards away, his horse grazing peacefully behind him. He looked uncertain, as though he had not meant to intrude but could not resist speaking. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "I did not mean to startle you. I water my horse here sometimes on the way back to the ranch. I can go somewhere else." "No," Olivia said, surprising herself again. "Please stay. The creek is hardly my private property." Quinn tied his horse to a tree and approached carefully, as though she were a wild thing that might bolt. He settled on the ground a respectful distance from her rock, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. Up close, Olivia could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar on his chin, the way his hands were calloused from hard work. "How are you finding Columbia?" he asked. "Aside from hot." "It is a good place," Olivia said honestly. "Better than I expected. Mr. Henderson has been very fair and Mrs. Chen's boarding house is comfortable. People have been kind." "But," Quinn asked gently. Olivia looked at him sharply. "Why do you assume there is a but?" "Because there is always a but," he said, his voice soft. "Nobody comes to a place like Columbia unless they are looking for something or running from something, sometimes both." For a long moment, Olivia said nothing. The water rushed over the rocks, insects hummed in the afternoon heat, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called out. She should have told him it was none of his business. She should have made some polite excuse and left. Instead, she found herself saying, "I made mistakes. Back in San Francisco. I allowed myself to be guided by fear instead of principle, and when I finally found the courage to be honest, it cost me everything." Quinn listened without interrupting, his creek water eyes steady on her face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Sounds to me like you made the right choice in the end. That takes more courage than most people have." "It does not feel like courage," Olivia said, and her voice cracked slightly. "It feels like failure." "Maybe," Quinn said. "Or maybe courage and failure look a lot alike from the inside, and it takes time to tell the difference." He paused, then added, "I made mistakes too. Before the war, after the war. Let fear make my decisions more times than I care to count. That is part of why I came west. Figured maybe I could learn to be braver out here, where nobody knew who I used to be. And have you? Olivia asked. Learned to be braver, Quinn smiled, and there was something vulnerable in it. Working on it. Some days are better than others. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the water flow past. Olivia realized she felt more at ease than she had in months, perhaps years. There was no judgment in Quinn's presence, no expectation beyond honest conversation. It was a gift she had not known she needed. Finally, as the shadows began to lengthen, Quinn stood and retrieved his hat. I should get back to the ranch. We are moving cattle tomorrow, and it will be a long day. He hesitated, then said, Would you mind if I called on you sometime, Miss Garrison? Properly, I mean. Maybe take you to dinner at the hotel restaurant. Olivia's first instinct was to refuse, to retreat behind her walls where it was safe. But she looked at Quinn's open, honest face and thought about courage and about the person she wanted to become. I would like that, she said softly. Quinn's smile could have lit up the evening sky. Next Saturday, then. Around 6. Next Saturday, Olivia agreed. She watched him ride away, his horse kicking up small clouds of dust that glowed golden in the late afternoon sun. Her heart was beating faster than it should, and there was a flutter of anxiety in her stomach, but underneath it all was something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or hope. The week passed with agonizing slowness. Olivia threw herself into her work, reorganizing the mercantile's entire inventory system, and implementing a new tracking method that Mr. Henderson declared revolutionary. Dorothy noticed her distraction and teased her gently about the handsome cowboy who had been asking around town about what kind of flowers Miss Garrison might prefer. Mrs. Chen simply smiled knowingly and said nothing, which was somehow more unnerving than any direct comment. By Saturday, Olivia was a bundle of nerves. She had exactly one dress nice enough for dinner at the hotel, a deep blue silk that she had brought from San Francisco and had not yet had occasion to wear. Dorothy helped her arrange her hair, dark brown waves pinned up with small pearl combs that had been her grandmother's. You look beautiful, Dorothy said firmly. Quinn Prescott is a lucky man. It is just dinner, Olivia protested, but her friend laughed. If you believe that, you are fooling yourself. I have seen the way that man looks at you, like you are water in the desert and he is dying of thirst. Olivia felt her cheeks flush. That is ridiculous. That is love, Dorothy corrected, or at least the beginning of it. Do not run from it, Olivia. Not everyone gets a second chance. Quinn arrived precisely at 6, wearing clean denim and a pressed white shirt that made his sun-darkened skin seem even darker. He had obviously bathed and shaved, and his hair was neatly combed back. He carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, yellow and purple blooms that must have taken him hours to gather. You look beautiful, he said simply, handing her the flowers. Thank you, Olivia managed. You look very nice as well. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Colombia, which meant the tables had actual tablecloths and the dishes matched. It was still rough by San Francisco standards, but Olivia found she did not care. Quinn held her chair for her, ordered wine that was passable if not excellent, and made conversation that was both intelligent and entertaining. He told her about the Riverside Ranch, how he had started as a simple ranch hand and worked his way up to foreman through sheer determination and a talent for understanding cattle. He spoke about Missouri, about growing up on a small farm and fighting in the war when he was barely 18. There was pain in those memories. She could see it in his eyes, but he did not dwell on it. What about you? He asked. What was San Francisco like? Olivia hesitated, then decided that Quinn deserved honesty. She told him about her father's death, about the fortune that had evaporated in bad investments, about her mother's desperate attempts to marry her off to restore the family's position. She told him about Charles Whitmore, about the courtship that had felt more like a business transaction, about her eventual refusal and the consequences that had followed. "He destroyed my reputation," she said quietly, "made it impossible for me to remain in society. My mother blamed me, said I had been foolish to refuse such an advantageous match. But I could not do it, could not marry him knowing I felt nothing but mild affection at best. It seemed dishonest, unfair to both of us." Quinn reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against her skin. "You did the right thing. Takes courage to choose honesty when it costs you everything." "It did not feel like courage," Olivia said, echoing her words from the creek. "It felt like I was throwing away my last chance at security, at a respectable life." "Respectability is overrated," Quinn said, and there was steel in his voice. "I would rather be honestly poor than dishonestly comfortable. Sounds like you feel the same way." Olivia realized he was right. Despite everything she had lost, despite the scandal and the exile, she did not regret refusing Charles. She regretted ever considering him in the first place, regretted the fear that had guided her for so long, but not the choice to be truthful in the end. "I have made mistakes," she said honestly, looking into Quinn's creek-water eyes. "Then make your next one with me," Quinn replied, and his voice was soft but certain. "Because I am about to make a mistake too. I am about to fall completely in love with a woman I barely know, and I figure if we are both making mistakes, at least we can make them together." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She should have been frightened by such directness, should have retreated behind her careful walls. Instead, she found herself squeezing his hand and saying, "That might be the best mistake I have ever made." They stayed at the restaurant until the owner began pointedly clearing tables around them, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other with words and glances, and the comfortable silence that fell between sentences. Quinn walked her back to Mrs. Chen's boarding house slowly, as though trying to stretch the evening as long as possible. At the door, he turned to her and said, "May I see you again? Tomorrow, maybe. The ranch has a lined shack up in the hills with a view of the whole valley. I could pack a picnic." "I would like that very much," Olivia said. Quinn smiled, then gently took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth rushing through her entire body. "Until tomorrow, then." Olivia floated upstairs to her room where Dorothy was waiting with barely contained excitement. "Well," her friend demanded. "I think," Olivia said slowly, "I think I just met the man I am going to marry." The summer passed in a blur of long rides into the hills, picnics by the creek, and stolen moments between Olivia's work at the mercantile and Quinn's responsibilities at the ranch. They talked about everything, from philosophy to poetry to their dreams for the future. Quinn wanted to save enough money to buy his own spread someday, a small ranch where he could raise cattle and horses and build something lasting. Olivia found herself imagining that future with him, saw herself keeping the books and managing the household, raising children in the clean mountain air. It was terrifying how quickly she fell in love with him, how completely. She had thought herself incapable of such depth of feeling, had convinced herself that her heart was too bruised to risk again. But Quinn was patient and kind, funny and strong, honest to his core in a way that made her feel safe. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never made demands or laid claim to her independence. He simply showed up, day after day, and loved her with a steadiness that took her breath away. In late August, They rode up to the line shack for what had become their regular Sunday afternoon escape. The view from the hilltop was spectacular. The whole valley spread out below them in shades of gold and green, with the Sierra Nevada mountains rising in the distance like a promise. Quinn had packed cold chicken and fresh bread, apples from Mrs. Chen's tree, and a bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion. They ate in comfortable silence, then lay back on the blanket Quinn had spread, watching clouds drift across the impossibly blue sky. Olivia felt Quinn's hand find hers, their fingers interlacing naturally. "Olivia," he said quietly, and something in his voice made her turn to look at him. "I need to tell you something." Her heart clenched with sudden fear. "What is it?" "The ranch owner, Mr. Garrett, he is getting old, wants to sell the riverside and retire to San Francisco with his daughter. He offered it to me first, said I have proven myself a capable manager, and he would rather see the place in good hands than just sell to the highest bidder." "Quinn, that is wonderful," Olivia said, sitting up. "Isn't it?" "It is," he agreed, sitting up as well, "but it is also terrifying. The price is fair, more than fair, but it is still a substantial sum. I have some saved and the bank would loan me the rest, but it would mean taking on considerable debt. Being responsible for not just myself but all the ranch hands and their families. It is a big risk." "You can do it," Olivia said with certainty. "You are the most capable man I have ever met, Quinn. You know that ranch better than anyone. You know the cattle, the land, the business. If Mr. Garrett believes in you, then you should believe in yourself." Quinn looked at her with such intensity that she felt it like a physical touch. "I need to know something first. I need to know if you will be part of it, because I do not want to build a future unless you are in it." Olivia's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "What are you asking me?" "I am asking you to marry me," Quinn said simply. "I know we have not been courting long by conventional standards. I know you came here to build an independent life, and I respect that. But I love you, Olivia. I love your strength and your honesty and your brilliant mind. I love the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on the ledgers. I love how you feed carrots to my horse when you think I am not looking. I love every single thing about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it." Tears were streaming down Olivia's cheeks, but she was smiling wider than she had ever smiled. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Quinn whooped with joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. He set her down gently and kissed her, soft and sweet, then deeper, with all the passion they had been carefully restraining for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn pressed his forehead to hers. "I do not have a ring yet," he said, "but I will get you one. The prettiest ring in California." "I do not need a ring," Olivia said. "I just need you." But 3 days later, Quinn presented her with a delicate gold band set with a small sapphire that matched her dress from their first dinner. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "My mother sent it to me before she died, said I should give it to someone special someday. Cannot think of anyone more special than you." They were married 6 weeks later, in early October, when the heat had finally broken and the air turned crisp with the promise of autumn. The ceremony was held in Columbia's small church, with Dorothy and Mr. Henderson standing up for Olivia, and the ranch hands from the riverside for Quinn. Mrs. Chen prepared a feast for the reception, which was held in the boarding house's garden and spilled out into the street. It seemed like half the town came to celebrate, bringing gifts and good wishes and stories about the cowboy and the bookkeeper who had found each other against all odds. Olivia wore a simple white dress that Dorothy had helped her sew, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Quinn wore his best suit, which was still a bit dusty from helping move cattle that morning, but Olivia thought he had never looked more handsome. When they spoke their vows, Olivia's voice was clear and steady, all her doubts washed away by the certainty of Quinn's love. The purchase of the Riverside Ranch went through the following week. Quinn took on the debt with Olivia by his side, both of them signing the papers that would bind them to the land and to each other. Mr. Garrett clasped Quinn's hand warmly and told him he had made the right choice, then turned to Olivia and said, "You have a good man here, Mrs. Prescott, but I suspect he has an even better woman." Moving to the ranch was both exciting and overwhelming. The main house was a sturdy two-story structure that needed work, but had good bones. Olivia threw herself into making it a home, sewing curtains for the windows, scrubbing floors until they gleamed, organizing the kitchen with the same efficiency she brought to the ledgers. She continued to keep the mercantile's books 2 days a week, both for the income and because she enjoyed the work, but her primary focus became the ranch's accounts. What she found when she reviewed the books was concerning. Mr. Garrett had been a good rancher but a poor businessman, and the Riverside's finances were shakier than they had appeared at first glance. They were not in immediate danger, but there was little margin for error. One bad winter, one cattle disease, one drop in beef prices, and they could lose everything. Olivia did not hide this from Quinn. Instead, they sat down together at the kitchen table night after night, working through budgets and projections, finding ways to cut costs without cutting corners. They decided to invest in better breeding stock, which was expensive initially but would pay off in higher quality cattle. They renegotiated contracts with buyers, with Olivia's skill at numbers giving them leverage they had not known they possessed. They were careful and strategic, and slowly the ranch began to stabilize. That first winter was hard. The snow came early and heavy, trapping them at the ranch for weeks at a time. They burned through firewood at an alarming rate, and more than once Olivia woke in the middle of the night to find Quinn gone, out checking on cattle in the brutal cold. She learned to manage the household in conditions she had never imagined in San Francisco, learned to stretch supplies and make do when the roads were impassable. But there were also moments of profound beauty. Nights by the fire with Quinn's arm around her, reading aloud while the wind howled outside. Mornings waking up to a world transformed by snow, everything clean and white and perfect. The fierce pride she felt watching Quinn work with the ranch hands, seeing how they respected him, how he balanced firmness with fairness. In March, when the snow finally melted and the first green shoots appeared, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had waited to be certain before telling Quinn. When she finally did, over breakfast on a morning when the sun was streaming through the kitchen windows, he went completely still. "A baby," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A baby," Olivia confirmed. Quinn's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He stood so quickly his chair fell over, came around the table, and dropped to his knees beside her, pressing his face to her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in every syllable. The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from terrible nausea in the early months, and the summer heat made her swell and ache. But Quinn was attentive and patient, taking over more of the household duties without complaint, bringing her cool water and rubbing her feet in the evenings. Dorothy visited frequently, bringing news from town and practical advice about childbirth. Mrs. Chen sent soups and teas that helped settle Olivia's stomach. In November, after 14 hours of labor that left Olivia exhausted and Quinn pale with worry, their son was born. They named him Samuel, after Quinn's father, and he was perfect. Tiny fingers that gripped Quinn's thumb with surprising strength, dark eyes that seemed to look right into their souls, a small rosebud mouth that found Olivia's breast with instinctive hunger. Quinn cried when he held his son for the first time, big silent tears rolling down his cheeks. "I never thought I could have this," he said to Olivia. "A family, a home, a life worth living. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," Olivia corrected gently. The years that followed were filled with the hard work and small joys of ranch life. Samuel grew from a baby into a sturdy toddler, then into a boy who followed his father everywhere, determined to be a rancher just like him. The Riverside thrived under Quinn and Olivia's management, becoming known throughout the region for quality cattle and fair dealing. In 1876, Olivia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose for the wild roses that grew along the creek where Quinn and Olivia had first really talked. Rose had her mother's dark hair and her father's creek water eyes, and she was as fearless as her brother was careful. By the time she was 3, she could ride better than most adults, and she had Quinn wrapped completely around her little finger. The ranch expanded gradually, carefully. They bought adjacent land when it became available, invested in irrigation to protect against drought, built better facilities for the cattle. Olivia's management of the finances was impeccable, and Quinn's skill with the cattle was unmatched. Together, they built something that was greater than the sum of its parts, but success did not come without challenges. In the spring of 1878, a late freeze killed many of the new calves, devastating their breeding program. In the summer of 1880, drought struck the valley, and they had to sell off a portion of the herd at a loss to keep the rest alive. Each crisis tested them, but they faced them together, Quinn's optimism balancing Olivia's caution, her strategic thinking complementing his intuitive understanding of the land and animals. They also faced the ordinary challenges of marriage, the small conflicts and adjustments required when two independent people commit to building a life together. There were arguments about money, about how to discipline the children, about whether to take risks or play it safe. But they had learned early to be honest with each other, to talk through their disagreements rather than letting resentment fester. And underneath, every argument was the bedrock certainty of their love for each other. One evening in late summer of 1882, after the children were in bed, Olivia and Quinn sat on the porch watching the sun set over the valley. Samuel was 10 now, Rose 6, and there was a third child on the way, due in the winter. The ranch was prospering, they had paid off the original loan from the bank, and life was as good as Olivia had ever dared to imagine. "You ever think about San Francisco?" Quinn asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Olivia considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I wonder what happened to people I knew, whether my mother ever forgave me, but I do not regret leaving. Everything that matters to me is here." "I got a letter today," Quinn said quietly, "from Charles Whitmore." Olivia turned to him in shock. "What? How did he even find me?" Apparently it was not that difficult. Small town, unusual circumstances. A woman from San Francisco who married a ranch foreman. Word gets around. Quinn pulled the letter from his pocket. "He wants to buy the Riverside, offering a substantial sum actually. Says he has invested in several cattle operations and wants to expand." Olivia felt cold despite the warm evening. "What did you tell him?" "I have not responded yet. Wanted to talk to you first." Quinn looked at her seriously. "It is a lot of money, Olivia. Enough that we could buy a bigger spread, maybe up in Oregon or Montana. Start completely fresh." "Is that what you want?" Olivia asked carefully. Quinn was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I want whatever will make you happy. If selling to him would give you satisfaction, some kind of justice after what he did to you, then I will do it. But if it would feel like giving him power over you again, Then I will write back and tell him the riverside is not for sale at any price." Olivia stood and walked to the porch railing, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to build into something meaningful. The valley was painted in shades of gold and purple as the sun sank lower, and she could see cattle grazing peacefully in the near pasture. This was her home, built not on her father's money or Charles Whitmore's name, but on honest work and true love. "Write back and tell him no," she said firmly. "Tell him the Riverside Ranch belongs to the Prescott family, and it always will. Tell him that I have made my choice, and I have never been happier with any decision in my life." Quinn came to stand beside her, wrapping his arm around her waist and pulling her close. "That is my girl," he said softly. "That is your wife," Olivia corrected with a smile, "and she has no regrets." The letter Quinn sent was polite, but unequivocal. Charles Whitmore did not write again. Their third child was born in January of 1883, another boy they named Henry. He was a placid baby, content to observe the world with serious eyes, and he grew into a thoughtful child who preferred books to cattle, though he loved the ranch just as much as his siblings did in his own quiet way. As the years passed, Olivia and Quinn became pillars of the Columbia community. They donated to the school where Dorothy taught, helped neighbors in times of crisis, employed dozens of ranch hands, and treated them fairly. Olivia served on the board of the library that was established in 1885, and Quinn was eventually elected to the town council, where his common sense and integrity earned him respect from all quarters. Samuel grew into a fine young man who took over more and more of the ranch's daily operations, showing the same instinct for cattle that his father possessed. Rose, true to her nature, became one of the best horse trainers in the region, with a gift for gentling even the most skittish animals. Henry discovered a talent for business and began helping his mother with the ranch accounts, his sharp mind finding efficiencies that impressed even Olivia. In 1890, Samuel married a schoolteacher from Sacramento, a smart young woman named Grace who fit into the family as though she had always been part of it. They built a house on the eastern section of the ranch and began a family of their own, giving Quinn and Olivia their first grandchild in 1891. Rose, meanwhile, showed no interest in settling down, too busy with her horses and the occasional rodeo competition, where she regularly outperformed men twice her size. Henry went to college in San Francisco, studying finance, but returned to Columbia every summer. Drawn home by ties that could not be broken through it all, Olivia and Quinn's love for each other only deepened. They had grown together rather than apart, had built something lasting not just in the ranch but in their marriage. They still took rides to the line shack on Sunday afternoons when they could, still sat by the creek where they had first opened their hearts to each other. Quinn still made Olivia laugh with terrible jokes, and Olivia still caught Quinn watching her with that expression of wonder, as though he could not quite believe she was real. On their 25th wedding anniversary in October of 1900, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was full to bursting with children and grandchildren, with friends from town and ranch hands past and present. Mrs. Chen, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, had come from Columbia with enough food to feed an army. Dorothy was there with her husband, a banker she had married late in life and who clearly adored her. Even some of the Callahan brothers' family had made the journey from Pennsylvania. As the sun set and the party moved from the house to the yard, where someone had built a bonfire and brought out fiddles, Quinn pulled Olivia aside. They walked a short distance from the noise and light, to a small rise where they could see both the celebration below and the valley beyond. 25 years, Quinn said, shaking his head. Seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean, Olivia said, leaning against him. They fit together perfectly after so many years, knew exactly how to stand so they both felt balanced. Do you remember what you said to me that night at the restaurant? Quinn asked. Our first real dinner together. I said a lot of things that night, Olivia replied with a smile. You said you had made mistakes, Quinn said, and I told you to make your next one with me. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Best thing I ever said, best decision either of us ever made. It was not a mistake, though, Olivia said softly. That is what I have learned. Loving you, marrying you, building this life together, none of that was a mistake. It was the first truly right thing I ever did. Then I guess we fooled ourselves, Quinn said with a grin. Made all the right choices while thinking we were making mistakes. Maybe that is the secret, Olivia said thoughtfully. Maybe the best things in life come when we stop trying to be perfect and just dare to be honest, to be brave enough to reach for what we really want, even if it scares us. Quinn pulled her into his arms and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of 25 years of love. I would do it all again, he whispered against her hair. Every single moment. So would I, Olivia whispered back. They returned to the party hand in hand, to the music and laughter and the people they loved. Samuel was teaching his daughter to dance, spinning her in circles while she giggled. Rose was arm wrestling with one of the ranch hands, grinning fiercely. Henry was deep in conversation with Dorothy about literature and philosophy. The bonfire cast flickering light over everything, warm and golden, and Olivia felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She had come to Columbia 15 years ago with nothing but shame and determination, had met a cowboy by pure chance, had dared to believe in second chances and honest love. And from those unlikely beginnings, they had built a life richer than any she could have imagined in her San Francisco society days. Not rich in money, though the ranch provided more than adequately. Rich in meaning, in purpose, in the deep satisfaction that came from work well done and love well given. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of joys and sorrows. Quinn's hair turned gray, then white, but his eyes remained that same clear creek water green. Olivia's face lined with age, but her mind stayed sharp, still managing the ranch's finances with the same precision she had brought to Mr. Henderson's chaotic ledgers all those years ago. They buried friends, including Mrs. Chen and Dorothy, mourned the passing of time even as they celebrated each new grandchild, each success, each simple day of being together. In 1905, on a crisp autumn morning much like the one when they had married 33 years earlier, Quinn woke with pain in his chest. Olivia immediately sent Samuel for the doctor, but she knew with a terrible certainty what was happening. She held Quinn's hand and whispered that she loved him, that he had given her the most beautiful life, that she would be fine, because of the foundation they had built together. No regrets. Quinn asked, his voice weak but his eyes still bright. Not a single one, Olivia said through her tears. You were the best choice I ever made. We were the best choice we ever made, Quinn corrected. And then he smiled that slow, warm smile she had fallen in love with by a creek 33 years ago, and he closed his eyes for the final time. Olivia was 62 years old and a widow. The grief was crushing, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. But she did not break, because Quinn had taught her strength, had shown her what it meant to face life with courage and honesty. She had 3 children who loved her, 8 grandchildren who needed her, and a ranch that had been built on love and hard work. She would honor Quinn's memory by continuing what they had started, by living fully and honestly, by being the person their love had helped her become. She lived another 15 years, watching the ranch continue to thrive under Samuel's management, seeing Rose finally settle down with a horse breeder from Nevada, celebrating Henry's success in expanding the ranch's business partnerships. She held great-grandchildren in her arms and told them stories about their great-grandfather, the cowboy with kind eyes who had taught her what real love looked like. When Olivia Garrison Prescott died in 1920 at the age of 77, she was surrounded by family in the house she and Quinn had made a home. Her last words were quiet but clear. "I have made mistakes," she whispered, echoing words from a lifetime ago. But loving Quinn was never one of them. They buried her next to Quinn on a hill overlooking the valley, beneath a spreading oak tree where they had often sat together, watching the sunset. The headstones were simple, just their names and the dates that bracketed their lives. But beneath Quinn's name someone had carved "He dared to love," and beneath Olivia's, "She dared to let him." The Riverside Ranch remained in the Prescott family for generations, growing and changing with the times, but never losing the essential character that Quinn and Olivia had given it. Their story became legend in Columbia, the tale of the San Francisco woman who had fled scandal and the Missouri cowboy who had found her, how they had built something lasting from honesty and courage and love. And on warm summer evenings, when the light turned gold and the air was full of the sound of crickets, people claimed they could sometimes see two figures walking hand in hand toward the old line shack. A woman in a blue dress and a man in worn chaps and a faded shirt, still finding their way to each other across time and memory, still making the best mistake they ever made together.